In previous videos, I've mentioned how every wrestler plays differently and how they have their own unique cards and unique abilities and unique stats which make them play very differently. And I want to describe today how Kurt Angle plays differently. And you obviously all know Kurt Angle. He's an Olympic gold medalist. He's won the 1996 golden medal, which he always wears around his neck. And more importantly, he's one of the best technical wrestlers in the world. And if you watch Kurt Angle matches, he can ramp up his momentum quickly. He has endless stamina. He can take a lot of damage. After all, he won the Olympics with a broken freaking neck. And more importantly, I think he's known for his throws, his suplexes, his wrestling background, and he's known to be probably the king of counters, right? He can counter any move, and more often than not into an ankle lock. And all this gets reflected in the game, and they're unique to Kurt Angle. So you'll notice he starts with high health and stamina comparative to other wrestlers. He has 17 stamina and 16 health. So he's one of the most powerful characters in the game. In addition to that, if you start looking through his cards, most of his attacks don't expend much stamina, which means that this stamina of 17 is more than enough for him to deliver an attack after another without exhausting himself. Most of his attacks, his low-level attacks, the ones that do damage 1 or 2, are strikes and grapples, but the second he kicks it into high gear, the second he starts going for bigger moves, then he really relies on throws extensively. And if you look at, for example, we said how famous he was for throws, and especially German suplexes. And you can see how all these could easily link together as part of his kind of series of German suplexes. So if he hits a German suplex, he can follow it up with a series of German suplexes, or he can end his suplex onslaught with a released German suplex. If he continues with a series of German suplexes, he can then transition easily into either an Olympic slam or an ankle lock, which have the same combo icons here. So his ability to chain together these suplexes to arrive at an ankle lock or an Olympic slam that would allow him to win is legendary. The other thing, and I think the most unique thing about Kurt Angle, is his ability to counter moves. Every wrestler in the game has the ability to do one reversal. In the case of Kurt Angle, he has 2. So he can reverse any attack by expending 1 stamina and doing 1 damage. But he can also do a much more powerful reversal. And they're both used 1 time during the game. And he uses up 2 stamina, does 2 damage, gains 2 momentum, but goes into a pinfall attempt, which is very powerful in the game. When you're trying to hit a big move to try to pin your opponent, you can easily reverse an opponent's move into an ankle lock. Just to exhibit how well he does on counters as well, it doesn't stop there. His infinite ability, the ability that he can use over and over as a defender, is he is able to block any attack that is thrown at him. So whenever an opponent plays a card, you have the option of using 1 stamina. Remember, Kurt Angle has a lot of stamina. He can roll the dice, and if he hits a 6, he would automatically block that move without having to get rid of these precious or discard any precious cards that he may have. Finally, Kurt Angle is a monster, and when you see him in a wrestling match, when he takes his straps off, it's game time. He's about to end this. And he can do that when he's on the attack. If he hits a damage of 2 or more, he can go into that override mode that I love to see, where he gets his game face on, and he automatically gains 2 stamina, 2 health, and 2 momentum, and gets ready to hit some of his powerful moves. So this is an overview of how Kurt Angle plays. He's really a defensive player, a counter player, but he can destroy you with some really big moves, and especially those lethal throws that he has at his disposal. We wanted to shift gears a little bit and show you one of our wrestlers that we created, and his name is Jax Felix. I think you've seen him in previous videos, and I've talked about him a little bit. So let me just give you a background on who he is, and then we can see what makes him special and how he plays differently than any other wrestler in this game. So Jax Felix was born in the future. He is born in 2222 on February 22nd. It's a miracle date for a miracle man. And he's a 5th generation wrestler from Winnipeg, Canada. He comes from a long line of successful wrestlers, world champions, his grandfather, his father, his great-grandfather. And you'll see a lot of his moves reflect some of the great wrestlers that have come from Winnipeg, Canada. And he grew up really craving attention. He loves the show. He loves going to plays. He loves when all eyes are on him. And you'll see that when you look at his attacking moves. They're all flashy. They're all things that would get the people talking about him. He debuted as a 17-year-old. He won matches against veterans straight away. By 25, he's a world champion. And at 33, he retired after 8 years of being a world champion. He retires early because he becomes this massive and successful movie star. He's very charismatic, very good looking, a showman really at heart. And I think that's one of his Achilles heels, is his heart is not always 100% into wrestling as, you know, a Kurt Angle would be. He really cares about the money, the fame, the attention, and he's criticized for it among the wrestling community. And his attention in this tournament is to not to fix that, no, but he wants to actually achieve even more fame and more attention and perhaps become an even bigger star than he already is. And so Jax Felix, the way he starts is he starts with only 12 health. Now, if you compare that to Kurt Angle, that's a lot less health, and especially with the other characters that we're going to be introducing to you. Now, he does have high stamina, the highest stamina in the game of 18, but that's just 2 points above Kurt Angle. It's not enough to say that that's what makes him special. I think what makes Jax Felix really, really special is his moveset and his ability to build momentum quicker than anyone else. So number one, his deck size is bigger than other wrestlers. He simply has more cards, so he has more resources. The other thing that's special about Jax Felix is he has more opportunities to do combos than any other wrestler in the game, and you'll notice most of his cards have certain combo icons linked to it, which makes it very easy for him to deliver some lethal combinations as he moves ahead. The third thing you'll notice about him, which I referred to, is momentum. There's no one in this game that comes even close. I mean, Kurt Angle might be second, but no one comes close to building momentum like Jax. And that's because his moves are full of energy and full of excitement, and you know, they're very beautiful to watch, and they build the crowd up. So you'll notice just a random draw of cards, just how high the value of his momentum cards is. It's 3s and 2s and 4s, and often against Jax, you'll find yourself on the back foot when it comes to momentum. And that really allows him to start hitting bigger and bigger moves easily before you chip away at his health and put him in an uncomfortable situation. In addition to all this, his special abilities complement what we just talked about. So his ability to land on his feet, which you might have seen in previous videos, that means if an opponent throws him for a damage of 3 or less, he actually lands on his feet. He doesn't take any damage, and that's a one-time ability, and he gains 2 momentum. So he negates damage that could have been done to him. As I mentioned, he starts with 6 cards in his hand. His hand size is 6 cards, which always gives him an advantage to block and reverse and stop opponents from doing too much damage to him. And having more cards obviously always helps. His ability to do this all night allows him to even draw and select 1 card from his discard pile and put it back into his hand. So it's even more cards that he can use to block and reverse. So in a nutshell, what Jax Felix has is the ability to use his cards to hit incredible combinations that do a lot of damage, build up incredible momentum, and use his cards in a way that will block attacks and prevent, and special abilities, and prevent too much damage happening to him, because he starts off with lower health than the others. He's a more difficult player to play as. You need to be more experienced to play as him, but I can tell you he's the favorite. He's my favorite in terms of playing. His playing style is really unique and very, very exciting. Alright guys, after talking about Kurt Angle and Jax Felix, I want to talk about Andre the Giant. This is one of the most exciting characters to build, honestly, and create, because what we see here today is someone that plays like no other player in ATW. Number one, he's a tank. If you look at his health is, his starting health is 20, which is higher than any other wrestler in ATW. In addition to that, his attack cards do a lot of damage. So if you just randomly draw some attack cards, you'll notice he does 3 damage, 5 damage, 3 damage. He's quite powerful for obvious reasons. And the third component is his abilities help him and reflect his size. So he can smother you, which not only deals this amazing damage, but he would remove 2 stamina from his opponent, making it even more difficult for his opponent to recover. But his permanent ability, which makes him one of the most difficult wrestlers to play against, is that a throw would require a +2 roll. Now, what does that mean? So if you go back and draft some of the Kurt Angle cards, on a normal day, if I play a release German suplex by Kurt Angle, I would have to roll a 4 or more to hit this successfully. Andre the Giant's ability means I have to hit a 6, which makes it very difficult to throw him around. So any wrestler like Kurt who has a lot of throws is in deep trouble when they face Andre the Giant. Now, what is his chink in his armor? Otherwise, he'd be unbeatable. Is that he doesn't have that much high stamina. His stamina starts at 11, and it gets spent quite rapidly. So you'll find yourself as Andre the Giant having to take constant breaks to recover your stamina and maybe even receive some damage so you can do so. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the Macho Man Randy Savage, probably the most popular wrestler in ATW. Now, as much as he is loved and known for his charisma and colorful outfits, Randy Savage's best has been as a heel. Most of his career, he's been a heel, and he was one of the best heels in the industry. And the way he plays reflects this. So, starting with his health and stamina, he has excellent health at 16 and excellent stamina as well. So he's well balanced. He has some great attack cards as well, and you can see them once you purchase the game. Some of them include, a pile driver, and a lariat takedown, and obviously a diving elbow drop and a diving double axe handle smash. In addition to that, his abilities reflect his career and his flamboyance. So number one is he always has a valet. So what that means is that whenever you pin Randy Savage, he has one additional chance to kick out, which is quite powerful in ATW. He is also, his flamboyance and charisma is reflected by macho madness. He can spend this token at any time, gain momentum, gain stamina, and his opponent doesn't get anything, which is key, right? Because a taunt ability on one of those cards allows your opponent to gain 1 health, right? If you spend this token, your opponent doesn't gain anything. So you gain stamina and you gain momentum, and your opponent gains nothing. In addition to that, he's a dirty player. So he has a brass knuckles in his trunks that he can use at any time when he is the defender, and he will deal 3 damage and gain 2 momentum, which is quite powerful in this game. So he doesn't have any major weaknesses. Randy Savage is a really cool player to play as. So now we want to talk about probably the most famous British wrestler of at least our generation, if not all time, which is the British Bulldog. Now, the British Bulldog on first sight looks like he's good at everything, but he's not the best at one particular thing. He's very well balanced. He has some really good health, he has some really good stamina, he has good momentum, good combinations, some very decent attack cards. But when you look behind the surface, you'll notice that he plays differently than other wrestlers. And that's when he gets into his signature and finishing maneuvers. So you'll notice all these powerful cards are, number one, extremely powerful. They do a lot of damage, unlike his, his normal kind of cards. In addition to that, they gain him a lot of momentum. So military press slam gains him 4 momentum and a delayed vertical suplex. The thing is with the British Bulldog is you want to cater the match where you can pull off these big moves, which can be major shifters. And the reason for this is he's a power wrestler. Everyone knows the British Bulldog is one of the strongest wrestlers to have ever lived. And you can see that in his abilities as well. So his infinite ability is that every time he does one of these big attacking cards, anything that's damage 2 and above, he can spend 1 stamina and deal an extra damage. So a military press slam not only does 4 damage, if you use your infinite ability or your permanent ability, you deal 5 damage instead of 4. So he's a very, very powerful wrestler that does a lot of damage. The other thing he does is he can use his power to make some of his signature and finishing moves easier. So one-time ability, that means that a military press slam doesn't have a roll of 5, it has a roll of 4. The final thing with the British Bulldog is the British Bulldog is also a fast wrestler. He has good technique as well. And that's reflected in his Shades of Wembley ability. Most of his big wins have come through roll-ups. If you've noticed his European title win, his Intercontinental title win. And so what he does is he can use this ability and roll up his opponent, as simple as. And this can be super powerful in the game to kind of win a match unexpectedly against an opponent. Before talking about how Mukundi Shumba plays, just a quick brief background. He was born over 1,000 years ago in southern Africa. And Mukundi Shumba was the greatest warrior Africa has seen. His name means the lion, right? The lion of what we call the lion of Africa. And Mukundi Shumba's story is that he was able to build a prosperous kingdom. And now awoken 2,000 years later into the future, right? 1,200 years into the future, what he notices is that his people have been enslaved in the past, his kingdom has been destroyed, and this tournament is something that's very important to him to set things right. Now, how does he play? He's also a tank, just like Andre the Giant. He has a health of 18, slightly less than Andre the Giant, but has a little bit more stamina. But what makes Mukundi Shumba really the tank of ATW is his special abilities. Number one, his permanent ability is any opponent finisher or signature does 1 less damage than it usually does. So big moves don't impact him as much as other wrestlers. In addition to that, he has this one-time ability to automatically kick out of any pin attempt. So he's a proper tank, he's difficult to beat, and he also gains 3 stamina when recovering, and he has a war cry as well that allows him to regain the stamina. So stamina is not that big of an issue like Andre. His cards are extremely powerful, probably as strong if not stronger than Andre in terms of the damage he does with each one of these strong cards. So a bear hug does 6 damage, it's the most powerful card in the game. Now, so what's his weakness? His weakness is Mukundi Shumba is not great with combinations. Remember how we talked about Jax Felix? He has great combos, he has great momentum, but low health. Mukundi Shumba is the exact opposite. He doesn't have great combos and he doesn't gain momentum quite often. So if you play Mukundi Shumba versus Jax Felix, be prepared to be on the back end of momentum. You'll rarely have that high momentum against someone like Jax or even Rey Jaguar. So he's a very interesting wrestler to play, very different than the rest of the wrestlers. You probably want to play Mukundi Shumba versus Andre. It's a weird experience. It's a much slower match, but it simulates these 2 big guys coming together in this nasty kind of brawl. Today we're going to be talking about Rey Jaguar, one of the most famous wrestlers, Mexican wrestlers of all time. He's living in the future, obviously. He's a fictional character. And his story is a very sad one. When he was a young kid, he's involved in a plane crash. And that plane crash, everyone on board dies. Everyone in his family except him. He's the only survivor. He survives without a single scratch. And the newspapers start calling him the unbreakable kid, right? He's the one that is basically escaped without a scratch. It's unbelievable. It's a miracle. And he grows up believing that, and he is such a huge lucha fan that he takes all these incredible risks during his career, and he never seems to get injured, right? He retires. It's really a miracle story. And so his whole persona is this fearless wrestler who just has absolutely no fear and seems like he's unbreakable. And the way he plays, it really reflects that. So he has a lot of stamina, not a lot of health. He has 13 health because he's not that big. But what he makes up for in terms of lower health is his abilities. So number one, he's unbreakable. When you pin him, he automatically gains 1 health. He's also has an ability that's called unbeatable. So at any time he can spend this token, and instead of using 3 stamina to recover 1 health like any other wrestler, he actually can use 1 stamina to recover 1 health 3 times. So spending 3 stamina, he can recover 3 health. The other ability is that at any point in time, his survivor ability kicks in and he gains 3 health and 2 momentum. He literally stands up after being attacked. So all these things, actually his health of 13 is very deceiving because his abilities can bridge that gap if played properly and correctly. The other thing that's great about Rey Jaguar is his attacking cards are just like most lucha wrestlers, are very high flying. They're exciting, they gain you momentum. You can see some of the amazing artwork here of some of, a moonsault to the outside, or Asai moonsault, or a 630 splash, or a super Spanish fly, or so forth, or a Mexican destroyer. The thing about Rey and his weakness is that because he's a smaller guy, his moves don't do as much damage. So even his very, very big moves that you see here, a 630 splash does 3 damage rather than, if you compare to the bear hug of Mukundi Shumba. So he's an interesting wrestler to play. All right, so now I want to talk about, I think, my favorite wrestler. Him and Jax are my absolute favorite. Oda. Oda Tsurugi, if there was one wrestler that can signify, the big villain, it's him. And his story starts off as he's a crime boss with a Yakuza. And he's a nasty human being, but then he gets reformed. He sees a fire in a building, he hears his ancestors call for him, he runs in and saves a bunch of people and becomes a hero, and he promises his ancestors that he will honor them and reform. And he becomes the ultimate baby face, one of the greatest wrestlers possible. But here's the thing, he wasn't the greatest. There was another wrestler, another Okada, 200 years into the future, 300 years into the future, that is the very best. And even though Oda ends up winning multiple world titles, he's never considered as the very best of his generation, let alone of all time. And that pride, that drive eventually gets to him, and he eventually turns heel and retires Okada through a dangerous pile driver on the concrete floor. He becomes one of the most hated men, but this heel turn still doesn't project him to become the best because he becomes too old. He's in his 40s, he's not in his prime, better wrestlers start coming about, and he gets into this depression, and eventually he finds a doctor who will create something the world has never seen before, something that is banned, which is a proper cyborg. You see Oda here is a cyborg. He has metallic components to him. He has AI that can help him. He has nanobots. And he comes back and destroys everyone. He retires every wrestler of note by ending their careers, to the point where wrestling becomes unpopular. No one wants to watch wrestling because all the stars have been retired. And eventually he gets banned and disappears. Now, will he make his way to ATW? That's your choice, right? If you back the highest pledge. All right, so how does Oda play? Well, he plays very differently. I know I keep saying that, but he does. His infinite ability is built on his jiu-jitsu experience. So all these cards that he has, these jiu-jitsu moves, these submissions, the octopus stretch and the guillotine choke and guillotine choke, and the rare naked choke. All these not only deal damage, but they also mean that the opponent suffers a stamina loss. So every one of those moves, the opponent suffers 1 loss of stamina in addition to the loss in health, which is brutal, right? You can barely recover. In addition to that, he uses his cyborg abilities very well. So one of his one-time abilities is if he uses a strike, This strike is a cross, and your opponent might say, I'm not blocking it, I'm not reversing it, it's fine, it only does 1 damage. Well, if you spend this, it does an additional 2 damage, so it becomes a high-powered move. He also has nanobots that he can use, which help him gain 3 health after a successful attack and 1 stamina, which means that his health of 16, which is already quite high, his health can actually go up all the way to 19. He also has decent health and decent stamina, and he really has, he has some good momentum, some good combinations. There are no weaknesses to Oda. He's been built in a way that means that he's a difficult wrestler to beat. That doesn't mean he's not balanced. Every wrestler has their own abilities. All I'm saying is Oda doesn't have this one weakness that you can exploit, and that makes him a very, very cool opponent to face and a cool wrestler to play as. And that brings us to, I think we've covered all the wrestlers. Remember that one of our pledge levels is going to be talking about creating your own wrestler. And that's something we're very excited to be working with you on.